So what if I told you that 2 cups of coffee with identical extraction levels in TDS could taste drastically different? Today, we are going to hopefully demonstrate some of that idea by changing a very important variable in our brew, and that is agitation, or how hard we pour onto the coffee bed. When you get into pour over coffee, you realize that there are a whole lot of variables that we can control to change the way we extract coffee. Water temperature is one, grind size is one, contact time, how long the water sits with the beans is gonna be one, and then also, of course, is gonna be agitation, or just how hard we're pouring onto that bed of coffee. When we pour super aggressively, we create basically a slurry in the coffee bed. We're pushing grounds up everywhere, we're churning the bed over. That can increase our extraction, which means you can probably grind a little bit coarser for that style of brew, but it also is going to push more fine particles into the paper filter, which can slow down our brew by means of clogging the paper filter. And we could also potentially get more fines in the final beverage, which is something you may want to be aware of at least. On the other end of the spectrum, we can pour really gently using something like a mellow drip or a drip assist, something like this, which basically turns our kettle pour into little tiny droplets that are gonna very minimally agitate the bed. Now, grind size and agitation usually go hand in hand. Without agitation, or with less agitation, I should say, we are going to end up with a lower extraction, so we need to compensate in some way. Typically, the best way to compensate is by grinding finer, because that's basically just going to expose more surface area of the bean. If we were to increase our water temperature for the low agitation brew, or use like a switch to increase our contact time, that's just going to introduce a whole nother set of problems that we really don't want to get into. Too often we look at coffee in a very linear way. This variable will increase extraction and this variable will decrease extraction. However, coffee is not linear. We are not extracting one compound from coffee. We're extracting potentially thousands of compounds. Sometimes we don't want to take everything that this coffee has and pull it out into our cup. Sometimes there's some stuff that we might want to actually leave on the table, and again, extraction is not linear. Thought this would be an interesting way to demonstrate that and talk about one of the most confusing variables in coffee. With these 2 brews today, I'm going to be brewing medium-high agitation, kind of my day-to-day recipe that I would normally use with a V60. And then I'm also going to be using this makeshift mellow drip. It is not a mellow drip. This is a Trickle 8 shower head that I put a temperature thermometer thing on that serves the same purpose to brew a low agitation brew over here. And we are going to compensate with our grind size so that these extractions are as close as we can get them, so that we're not just simply tasting something that is more extracted. I frequently enjoy both these recipes that I'm about to show you. I think they bring out different characteristics in coffees, and I think they kind of present the coffee in 2 different ways. So for the coffee today, we have this wonderful Sebastian Ramirez Red Fruits decaf from Perk coffee. I'm brewing this decaf because it is late in the evening and I'm gonna drink both of these cups and they won't go to waste. So that's gonna be great. Something that actually surprised me in my testing for this is, while we do need to grind finer for the low agitation brew, I actually did not need to go quite as fine as I had been going for a lot of my low agitation brews. This is actually my second time filming this video, and the first time the cups were far enough apart in extraction level that it just didn't really make sense to compare them. I also went in blind with a coffee I'd never tasted, and to be honest, I really didn't enjoy the coffee that much, which I think would have made for a pretty boring video. So instead of going in blind, we are using a coffee that I have drank many times. This is actually the 3rd roaster I've gotten this specific coffee from. This is actually probably my favorite roast of it. Perk did a pretty bang up job on it. It has a lot of raspberry notes, some strawberry, really heavy on the sweetness. You maybe get some like raspberry tea. This roast and this batch definitely leans more towards the raspberry notes, where the ones I had prior were definitely more in the strawberry world, which I'm enjoying kind of the heightened raspberry citric acidity that's happening with this. It's really nice. I'm gonna do my best to keep these temperatures as similar as possible, so the one that we brew second, we probably will pour into a carafe and just try to crash it just a little bit. But we will start with the higher agitation brew. I'm gonna be grinding this at a 5.4 on the ZP6. I'm gonna hit both these with a little bit of preheating. For this high agitation recipe, we are gonna do 3 pours, basically like a double bloom and then 1 main pour up to our final weight. Now, there are recipes, like say the 4-6 method that, you know, are gonna, or 5 pour recipes that are gonna introduce a lot more agitation than this even. However, I didn't really wanna get into the world of these like more 4-6 style, like really high agitation recipes. This is just more of a kind of quick, easy to follow recipe that should work with most coffees really well, doesn't require a super coarse grind, will be a little bit closer to our low agitation recipes, so that should hopefully show that even on this kind of smaller scale, we're still gonna see some pretty decent differences. So our first pour is gonna be about 2 times the weight of our coffee, so up to about 30 grams. And we're gonna wait till about 30 seconds, and then we are going to pour an additional 30 grams. So again, like kind of a double bloom here. All right. And then once we hit right around a minute, we're gonna pour up to our final weight, which is going to be 240 grams for like a 1:16-ish ratio for this coffee. And you notice I am pouring a little bit higher here, not letting the stream break though. Small circles in the middle, and I am definitely, you know, kicking up that bed quite a bit here. And as that's drawing down, sometimes I will give this a swirl. Probably just do a real light swirl with this one because it is drawn down pretty slow. And go ahead and weigh out my next dose while that's finishing up. We're at about 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and we're getting pretty close. I bet it's gonna finish right around 240 is my guess. Zero our scale here, and weigh out another 15 grams. So it looks like full drawdown happened right around 250. So for our low agitation brew, I'm gonna pull this down to 5. Now, that still is pretty coarse, I know, and some of you might be thinking, oh, this is gonna be a way lower extraction, but from my testings, I have found that we don't need to change grind size as much as you'd think. One reason this might be the case is because these lower agitation brews typically run just a tad bit longer, just because we have to pour slower in order to not agitate the bed as much. So that increase in contact time is gonna give us a little bit of a bump in extraction anyways. And I have found these 2 grind sizes to yield extremely similar strength cups in just my taste test. And we're just letting taste guide us here. 15 grams of coffee, ground a little bit finer this time, as mentioned. I will start with a bare kettle pour. Most, you know, low agitation recipes will do this. It is good to use a bare kettle to really push your water through and push some of those volatile compounds out early. I'm gonna let this bloom for maybe 40 seconds, 45 seconds, because we're only doing a single bloom instead of the double bloom. And then we're still doing 3 pours, but I'm basically gonna split the weight in half from here. So we poured a 40 gram bloom. At 45 seconds, we're gonna pour 100 grams. And the reason I'm doing 2 pours is because if we get too much water, you know, stacked on top of the bed of coffee, we might increase our chances of having a lot of bypass around the coffee bed with the V60, which we don't want. Once I start to see the coffee bed a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and do our second pour, another 100 grams. 240. And I'll show you guys a video of this here so you can see just how clear this water is. This one finished maybe around 3 minutes, so like really, really close to this one in terms of drawdown time. I will show you these beds side by side. So you can see with the higher agitation bed here on the left, how much fines ended up in that paper filter versus over here, the low agitation bed on the right, those fines did not mitigate to the paper filter. So you can see a very big difference there. This might mean that there are more fines in this cup than this one, but we'll taste and find out. Typically, when you hear people talk about the differences between these two types of brews, you're gonna hear that the low agitation will be maybe a little less exciting, a little less acidity on the front end, and it might be a little smoother overall. So we got a little blue mark on the higher agitation brew. Oops, spill a little bit. And we will crash the temperature just a tad bit. I didn't even pour all of it in there, but that should equalize those a little bit. And I'm alone today. I don't have Madison to come mix these up for me, so I made a little device. This should help me with a blind taste test here. I'm gonna grab that real quick. So I went into the garage and constructed this little spinny thing from some wood and some little wood stoppers that I had laying around. So what I'm gonna do is set both cups of coffee on here, close my eyes, spin this around a few times, and grab these cups of coffee off of here, and we'll do some tasting. I'm just gonna do this enough times that I forget where I started, to be honest. All right, I'm gonna close my eyes so I don't, look at the wood. Y'all know I'm not cheating there. Also, why would I cheat here? Grab my spoon, and we're going to start tasting. Let's begin. Very nice. Ooh, very nice as well. So right off the bat, the temperature between these two is about right. So we did good on that. It's not really giving anything away. This one tastes slightly flatter right off the bat, maybe. Yeah, I do much prefer this cup, I believe. And this is just, this particular coffee in this particular scenario. So what I'm tasting is really hard to describe because the acidity with both these cups is there, and it's roughly the same, I would say. However, this cup has an acidity that kind of stays pretty flat throughout the whole cup. Yeah, it's there from the moment it hits your tongue, and it's still, the aftertaste lingers much longer. This cup, in comparison, you could almost say feels a little more hollow. The acidity in this one happens really quickly and then kind of fades, and then there is a nice kind of sweetness in the aftertaste that lingers, but overall it's a little bit of a shorter experience where this one really just keeps going. However, this one feels a little more vibrant, I guess you could say. Would be one way to put it. And they're not all that different. The extraction level feels about the same. So my gut, which I'm pretty sure is right, is telling me that this is the low agitation brew. This is the higher agitation brew. And we are correct. So yeah, I think this really demonstrates something super interesting that, you know, these coffees, like I was saying, in terms of their extraction are very similar, maybe not perfect. I think we might still be just a hair higher in this cup, but it doesn't change the fact that these presentations are just like completely different. This is a more kind of vibrant, fun acidity that just pops up and then it goes away, and then, you know, kind of sweetness comes in and lingers, and it's a little bit, it is a little bit lighter in body. It doesn't have as much oomph to it. This cup, on the other hand, has a very heavy, silky body. The acidity is there from the beginning to the end. All the flavors kind of just feel like they're happening at once. They all just kind of mesh together. Now, that's not saying that the cup is like muddy necessarily and that the flavors are super blended, because there are the layers. Like, you can taste raspberry, you can taste even a little bit of like black tea, or a little bit of, you know, they put marshmallow on the bag. I definitely get that kind of in the sweetness. Yeah, you know, you get those layers, but it's just a heavier experience versus this one over here is a little more bitey. And interestingly, I know I said I preferred this one when I first started sipping, but as they cool, I'm starting to prefer the lower agitation brew, which is something that I've always found super interesting. I remember the first time I had coffee from a Trickle-8. I was at this coffee shop and ordered, you know, one of their pour overs on the menu, and I noticed they were brewing it in a Trickle-8, which is a low agitation, no bypass brewer. And when I first started sipping on the coffee, I was looking for, you know, the notes that they had listed and just wasn't really tasting much. However, as that coffee cooled, it just really opened up and I really started to taste the layers of flavor, and it was really, really wonderful cup of coffee. I actually bought the Trickle-8 not long after that experience, which is where this shower screen comes from. And every time I brewed with it, had the exact same experience. And I think it has to do with the acidity presentation, but it is very interesting that, for me and my palate at least, when hot, I do not really enjoy low agitation, low bypass brewing. Yeah, but as these coffees cool, I'm actually starting to prefer this one because the acidity is getting kicked up. Whereas this one is beginning to taste a little more hollow, like the acidity is a little sharper. However, both of these cups would be incredibly enjoyable. I would be super happy if I got either of these at a cafe. I think this demonstrates that agitation is this massive tool and this massive lever that we have to pull when it comes to making coffee. I hope you found this helpful. If you are normally someone who does lower agitation brews, try blasting your bed with some water and just see what happens. If you're someone who does blast through the coffee bed, try using a drip assist, Mellow Drip or Trickle-8 or anything, you know, with shower screen, and, you know, grinding a little bit finer and seeing what you get, because for some coffees you might find that actually really brings out something that you enjoy. There's no right or wrong answer here. That's the cool thing about coffee, is that it's all about experimentation, having fun, doing what you enjoy. Since these are decaf, I'm just gonna go ahead and drink both of these, and I might do something illegal here. And, oh yeah, best of both worlds right here. I hope you've had a wonderful day, and I hope you brew something wonderful, and I will see you again.